Welcome to our new series. Welcome to church. And turn in your Bibles to Daniel chapter 1 this morning. Kudos to our incredible creative team in putting that video together. I'm going to throw something up on the screen, a quote: "Religion must die in order for mankind to live." These are the words of TV host and atheist Bill Maher. In 2008, he put out a documentary that was designed to make religious people of faith, look like utter idiots. In fact, he called them terrorists. Look at the quote again. "Religion must die in order for mankind to live." That is not very different from what Karl Marx famously said in 1843, "Religion is the opium of the people." I'm believing that you have probably seen that or heard of that before. That's the philosophy of Karl Marx, the founder of Marxism. After Marx came on the scene and people were dazzled by him in Russia, the followers of Karl Marx yanked all the religious teaching from the school system, and they outlawed criticism. Anybody who would speak against atheists or agnostics was punished. They then burned 100,000 churches in Russia, and so the clergy of the country demanded religious freedom, as you might expect. And because they demanded religious freedom, they were sentenced to death. Now, don't think this happened 1,000 years ago. Between 1917 and 1935, 130,000 Russian Orthodox priests were arrested, and 95,000 of them were executed by firing squads. That's recent history. I've told you before about my first day of college. I've told you this story on many occasions, how my professor found out that I was a believer, and he stood and in front of the class said, pointing at me, "My aim in this class is to dismantle your belief system." It is this dismantling of our belief system that happens to be the aim of people both outside the church and inside the church, sadly. On one end of the spectrum, you have progressive liberals on the left, and on the other end of the spectrum, you have Christian deconstructionists, all who want to marginalize us as being sheer idiots if we believe in this book, if we teach our children the truths of the Bible. And what they want is basically for us to shut up and go away. That's their agenda. They want to remove our voice from the public square. In short, they want us to conform. Just shut up and do what we say. A psychologist by the name of Nicholas Humphrey was lecturing at Oxford University, and he admitted in his speech his goal, and I'm going to quote it. His goal is to argue in favor of censorship against freedom of expression. And then he even admitted who he was aiming at in particular. Again, he said, moral and religious education, especially the education a child receives at home. I want you to see what he said in that speech. He made a shocking statement. He said, "Children have a right not to have their minds addled by nonsense, and we as a society have a duty to protect them from it. So we should no more allow parents to teach their children to believe, for example, in the literal truth of the Bible, than we should allow parents to knock their children's teeth out or lock them in a dungeon." Interesting that he would equate teaching your kids the Bible with child abuse. That is the same ideological stance as communist Russia. That is the same ideological stance as any totalitarian regime. But you need to know that there's a method to their madness. It comes in stages. First, they will redefine vocabulary. They use words you're familiar with, and they'll on purpose choose noble, lofty sounding words that nobody would argue against. I mean, who would dare oppose equality? Who would dare speak out against freedom or science? Problem is, the meaning they pour into those words are vastly different from the understood meaning of those words. So they'll use vocabulary that you're familiar with, but they begin redefining it. Second, they will stigmatize their opponents. If you don't agree with them, they will label you. They will vilify you. They'll call you names. They'll call you homophobic. They'll call you xenophobic or Islamophobic or misogynistic or sexist, or the big one now is racist. And the reason they do this is they just want you to shut up. Don't say anything at all. Because if you can label somebody as phobic or unscientific, you can then perhaps take away their First Amendment right of free speech and even get them banned, canceled from Facebook or Twitter or any big tech platform. The Apostle Paul said, "I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies holy and acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." A better translation, I think, is the Phillips version. Don't let the world squeeze you into its own mold. Well, how do we do that? How can our little voice and our presence stand up to the giant of conformity? Fortunately, a little kid by the name of Daniel shows us how in Daniel chapter 1. I don't have time to read and comment on the whole chapter, but we are going to read sections of it. And I want to begin with the predicament that Daniel was in. Now, let me give you the long and short of it. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, has gained power. He has taken over the known world, the world of the Middle East. He has taken captive Jerusalem, and he has brought people with him to Babylon, including Daniel and his friends, and he is looking for servants for his palace in Babylon. That takes us into verse 4, where we read, "Young men in whom there was no blemish, but good-looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge, and quick to understand, who had ability to serve in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the language and literature of the Chaldeans. And the king appointed for them a daily provision of the king's delicacies, and of the wine which he drank, and 3 years of training for them, so that at the end of that time they might serve before the king. Now from among those of the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. To them the chief of the eunuchs gave names. He gave Daniel the name Belteshazzar, to Hananiah Shadrach, to Mishael Meshach, to Azariah Abednego." I want to fill in a couple of the gaps. A battle had just taken place. One of the most famous battles in history. If you're a history buff, you'll know of this. The Battle of Carchemish happened in 605 BC. Carchemish is an area today in present-day Turkey. It is where Babylon defeated the combined armies of Assyria and Egypt. When that battle was won, Nebuchadnezzar was large and in charge. He was the new sheriff in town. The rest of the world was easy pickings. So he could pick off less powerful kingdoms, including the kingdom of Jerusalem. So in that same year, 605 BC, he attacked Jerusalem. He did it again in 597 BC. He did it again in 586 BC. The last time he did it, he destroyed the city, burned the temple with fire. But on that first date, 605 BC, is when Daniel was kidnapped from his home and taken 1,600 miles away to live now in the courts of the Babylonian king.